This is Passport to Everywhere.
My guest today is Pablo Carrington, CEO and founder of the hotel management company Marugal, who, though he keeps a very low profile, has been recognized as a revolutionary in the hotel industry.
You look at Cap Rocat today, and it's very difficult to discern what was there before and what's new. Now everything just fits in very naturally and always with a sense of place.
Welcome to Passport to Everywhere with Indagare's Melissa Biggs-Bradley. Melissa is the founder and CEO of Indagare, a travel and media company committed to inspiring and empowering people to change their lives and the world through travel while having a positive impact on the places they visit. On the show, Melissa will reveal a behind-the-scenes look at some of the world's most treasured places, transport you to dream destinations and hotels, and introduce you to some of the most extraordinary people she's met on the road. This is Passport to Everywhere.
Born in Spain and raised between Mallorca and California, Pablo's appreciation for local cultures shaped his upbringing. After pursuing what he terms an unfulfilling career in finance, Pablo took a year off in search of his true calling. It wasn't long before he landed in the hospitality space and laid the foundation for Marugal in 2003. Pablo's vision for his company was clear from the start. He wanted to create a boutique hotel company celebrating unique properties with tailor-made luxury. His commitment to establishing a sense of place became the signature of Marugal's approach long before it became a trend in the industry. Today, Marugal manages some of Europe's most prestigious hotels, and the crown jewel of his collection is Cap Rocat in Mallorca, which is the focus of our conversation today. Cap Rocat is set along the shores of the Mediterranean Sea in an old military fortress, reimagined by architect and designer Antonio Obrador, who is also Pablo's partner in life. It's a serene retreat with 30 rooms situated in former cannon ports overlooking the nearby cliffs. It boasts award-winning restaurants and an exceptional spa carved right into the rock face. I was immediately taken by the gem of a property during my visit there last spring. In fact, as part of our Indagare partner trip with Architectural Digest, we had a very memorable lunch at Cap Rocat, as well as a visit to Pablo and Antonio's amazing house in the heart of Palma de Mallorca. I'm excited to have Pablo here with me today to talk about his exquisite hotel, as well as ways he's preserving cultural heritage, building a sustainable future, and of course, why he thinks it is that Mallorca is still considered paradise. Plus, the best ways to experience the Spanish island during your next trip, which I hope you are inspired to take. Pablo, I would love to start with your background. I know you were born in San Sebastian, but your father is American from California. Your mother is Spanish from Basque Country. Let's start with how growing up with parents from different countries impacted your view on the world.
I think there's an obvious side to it, which is obviously that you gain perspective, no? Because especially growing up in the Spain of the 70s, which was still a very closed country, and even in the early 80s, it was I wouldn't say closed in the 80s, but definitely very non-developed in terms of internationality. But I think what really did shape me was an appreciation for what differentiated each place. Like, for example, California, every time I went to California, there was a smell, there was a light, there were noises that were from California, there were Venetian blinds that were only from California. There were so many things that for me were California, no? In the same way that we would go to the family house that we had in the north of Spain, and they use a specific type of red pepper there to cook dishes. And it was just like the smell of the cook in the kitchen was a smell of the particular of La Rioja, not of nowhere else. Same when we're going to France. So I think it woke up in me a sense of, the difference in each place and the value of the characteristics of each place. No?
That's beautifully said. And I love that sense. For me, when I get off the plane in Africa or in the Caribbean, there's like a very distinct smell. In Africa, it's soil, it's the earth, and the Caribbean, often it's the scent of kind of smoke. But it's amazing. And
I've always wanted to move that I should probably write a biography just about smells, because I think I could probably go through my entire life with references of, different smells, the smell of wax when they used to wax the floors by hand at home, which obviously no one does anymore. But there are just so many smells that define my biography somehow.
Yeah, it's very Proustian. And we're lucky. I mean, I always think about people who lost their sense of smell during COVID.
and how horrible that would be because it's just such a rich thing to have those smells. So
Totally.
you were not always going to be in hotels. You started your career, you and I have talked about it. I know you were educated partly in the US. You went into banking. Share with the listeners.
Yeah, I was always jealous of the people that had a clear vocation. No, that I want to be a doctor, I want to be a lawyer, an architect, but I had no idea what I wanted to be. So I started in banking and looked up at my bosses, after 3 years, and they put you on the fast track program to be a whatever manager and this and that. And I kept looking at my bosses thinking, I don't want to be you. And then I moved on to strategy consulting, which I loved. It was amazing, restructuring airlines and enjoying a fantastic job. But again, looking up at my bosses and being like, I don't want to be you. I don't want to be a partner in this company. I don't want to work 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. And no, this is not for me. So I ended up quitting everything and taking a year off to reflect on what to do. Came across an extraordinary coach. Actually, last year when we celebrated the 20 years of the company, I dedicated my speech to her because she was the one that from nowhere, because I would have never thought I would have gone into this industry. She was the one that sort of guided me through the process. A super interesting exercise, and out came the hotel industry.
I'm fascinated by coaches, and I have a lot of friends who've had their lives transformed by, in some cases, I have a friend who went to Tony Robbins and totally changed his life, and all of his dreams came true. But I'm fascinated by the concept of coaching. What was her exercise?
The first 2 hours, first of all, she told me, I'm not your psychologist. We're here. We have a mission. We have a business contract, and it's to find out what you're going to be good at. No, because that was what I said to her. I said, listen, I don't know what I'm good at. I don't know where I should be going. So she bombarded me for 2 hours with questions that were totally random in every direction. It would be, what was your childhood dream? What was your favorite subject in school? What did you think of your father when you were 15? Totally random in every direction. And at the end of it, she came with a resume. She came up with a definition. She said, you're deciding your career based on what other people think you're good at, not on what you want to be. So I remember her giving the example of saying, I could perfectly well now be the head of the post office company in France. I was in Paris at the time, and tell you that you would be the best man to develop the post service in this. And you'd be like, okay, yeah, I'll do it. Because I was more in the reflection of the other than in what I was, than in what I wanted, no? And that's how she started the exercise. And then with a funnel, literally with a funnel, sort of, putting all sorts of ideas in there, and the funnel kept getting smaller and smaller. And at the end, it was the hotel industry, over a period of 6 months. I mean, it was a lot of work, obviously, but a fascinating work. And I think I was very lucky. I think there are a lot of now coaches everywhere. Not even cats have coaches. But so it's really, it's about finding the right one. But if you find a good one, it's extraordinary what they can do for you.
That's amazing. So you realized it should be the hotel industry, and you just celebrated your 20th anniversary. Talk about the next steps. How did you then go about your approach?
So I started with a hotel project in Paris, working on the hotel project, trying to find the investors. And parallel to that, we had a home in San Sebastian in the north of Spain, where my mother's family is from. And the family home was sold to the lawyer, who I guess was more successful than the family. And he took it over and decided to convert the house into a 30-bedroom hotel. And anyway, so he starts creating the hotel. Nowadays, the hotel industry is very professionalized, and I think everybody looks at it with the respect for the profession that it requires, no? But I would say that 15 years ago, there was still that idea that, you put a receptionist, 2 croissants, and the thing just works on its own. Well, he soon discovered that it was a lot more complex than that. And thinking that I knew about hotels, which I didn't, because I was trying to open my first in Paris, he said, Pablo, please come and help me get this thing off the ground and start it. So, incredible. But my first hotel was actually a home of my mother's family, where the chapel where all of the cousins had gotten married was now a library. And anyway, so I really enjoyed that, and enjoyed from the beginning, had a very clear idea that I wanted to create something that had the personality of the place where it was at. No? So I told my mother, where did you buy the staff uniforms for the house when it was at home? Because I want them to wear the same uniforms. I want guests to come here and feel what it is to be in a stately home of San Sebastian from the 19th century that used to belong to a well-known family from there. And I wanted them to live that experience. So I think very early on, I had a very clear idea that identity and creating something unique was important.
That's something that has continued in all of your hotels, and in some ways is often why people don't realize how many hotels you actually oversee, because they're not an obvious chain. Each one has a really great sense of place. And I know you like that expression. I'm a huge fan of that, and that's what I'm always looking for. But what would you describe sense of place being? And do you think that's why your hotels have been as successful as they have been, because you really hone in on that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been using the term since 2003 when we started. Nowadays, everybody uses it. No, the term sense of place. I remember an absurd example in Havana where the massage menu had a Cuban massage, and I was like, "Oh, what is a Cuban massage?" And they said, "Well, you get your back rubbed with rum, and after the massage, you smoke a cigar." I was like, "No." I mean, what is Cuban about that, or what is even wellness about that?
Oh
Anyway,
my God, that's
so
ridiculous.
so it's taking sort of a sense of place to the ridiculous extremes, no? But actually, when I was starting Villasoro, which was the first hotel in San Sebastian, I remember thinking one thing. I was like, okay, I remember being in Delhi when I was young, and on one of the occasions we had to stay in a chain hotel. I won't say which one. And on another occasion with my father, we had to stay in which wasn't where we usually stayed. I had to stay in a chain hotel in New York. And I thought, you know what? I remember the times we stayed in the Imperial in Delhi perfectly well. I remember the times we've stayed at the Plaza and at the Pierre back then, which were the two great hotels in New York. I remember perfectly well with every detail. I have no recollection of my stays in the chain hotel in Delhi and in the chain hotel in New York. That sort of provoked the idea of, that's what's going to define the hotel. Because I want Melissa to remember 12 years down the road the particularities of her experience in Cap Rocat, even if she never went back. But and it will only be if we actually develop something very strong that makes sense, and not a Cuban massage, but something that really makes sense to that property and to where it's located and to the service philosophy that you develop around it.
You're completely right. It's funny because I remember going to Venice for the first time years ago and staying. There was a chain hotel, it was Chiga Hotels, which was a very special chain because it was
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it
The Daniele.
was the
No, I agree with
Aga Khan.
you.
Yeah, it was the Daniele. And this was, I think I was 16 years old. But every time I go to Venice still, I remember the magic sense of those special hallways. They had this wonderful open stairwell, and men would put their shoes outside. And, it was everything about it was the Fortuny and nails and the Murano glass, but it was so Venetian. And I think you're so right. Those are the things we want a hotel to represent, the place as well as its really distinct, memorable details.
Exactly. And I think chain hotels have a sense and a purpose and a place for that. Sometimes that's what you want. You want something functional. You're going for work. You're not looking for anything else. But I'm in the business of really of provoking something different. You have to feel Andalucía if you're in Malaga. You have to feel San Sebastian if you're in Aquelarre. You have to, and Beau Rivage in Geneva. It has to be what it is. It's a 160-year-old hotel. You cannot just wipe all of that out and create a random, anonymous hotel. No?
What is your trick then, Pablo, to get to the essence of a place and distill it and put it into a hotel in a way that works? We talked in the beginning about smell, but what are some of the ways that you immerse yourself in a destination and feel that you can consistently bring that into the property and into the guest experience?
It's probably finding the balance between bringing identity to the guest experience, bringing, for lack of a better word, sense of place to the guest experience, but knowing the fine line with making it a Disney production. Because I want you to have a real Portuguese experience when you stay at our hotel in Melides, but I don't. It can't become suddenly, a typical postcard or typical Disneyland, or taking it a bit to the extreme. So I think it's about just that subtlety. So what would a Portuguese person be proud of if he were to come, if he would go to a hotel in his own country? What would a Mallorcan be proud of if he went to Cap Rocat, or a Menorcan if he went to Torralbenc? So it's that subtle touch of the local, just the same as if you were staying in somebody's home. If you were invited to somebody's house in Paris and you're staying in their guest bedroom, they don't have a copy of the Eiffel Tower on the bed table so that you feel like you're in Paris, but they're subtle things, little touches that you're in Paris. And it might be the smell, as you said, it might be the fabrics, it might be the colors, but it's not obvious. It's the compendium of everything that makes it, yes, I'm staying in the beautiful apartment of my friends in Paris. And so that's a bit what we try to do in each hotel.
It's so funny because when you gave the example of the Venetian blinds in California, I immediately thought when I first moved to France at 16, the French windows, the opening the windows out and that special door, the handle on the windows, for me was like no place else. That was such an odd thing, was the window. But the hotel that you just mentioned in Melides is the one that you open, you run, but with Christian Louboutin. And again, such a sense of place and full of personality. What I want to focus on today, because you've got so many amazing hotels, but Cap Rocat to me is the jewel in the crown, if that one were to describe your company, in part because of how well known it is compared to the others, but also because of what you accomplished there. And I am a big advocate of how tourism can actually be a force of good and can bring communities together and preserve cultures that are unique and distinctive. And for those listeners who haven't yet been lucky enough to go to Cap Roca, it is one of the most beautiful hotels in the world. It's remote, it's on a nature reserve in Mallorca. It was originally a 19th century military fortress. And you feel the history as soon as you're in the grounds. I mean, there's, these wonderful tall walls, fortress walls, and the way you've made an incredibly beautiful, sexy, contemporary property out of this old fort on the point, which is on the water. It's amazing. But I'd love to hear you describe that property and the obstacles that you overcame to create it, because it was not an easy project.
No, it wasn't, and I have to say probably the 80% of the merit is Antonio Orador, because he, as the architect and the visionary behind this, what was dubbed back then this crazy project, which will be the end of you, which was the phrase we kept hearing. Yes, because it's a 19th century military fortress. The end of the 19th century in Spain is very traumatizing, because it's when we lose Philippines, Cuba, and Puerto Rico. So it's the end of the biggest empire in the history of the world. And suddenly Spain is like, oh my God, what else can we lose? And the idea came, we have to protect the Bay of Palma, and we have to take what was already a medieval fortress that was there, a very small fortress, and we have to convert it into this big fortress, which has the particularity, and maybe that's also what makes it very special, is that it's hidden. It's sunk in the rock. So a lot of the buildings were actually dug out of the rock. So it's what in architectural terms is called building in negative. You don't build ground up, you build ground down. And that's why, as you say, the arrival is quite spectacular, because once you pass the guard at the gate, because you can only go in if you're a guest of the restaurant or of the hotel, and you go down these cuts of limestone, which are, at the beginning they're about 5 feet, and then they go all the way up to 20 feet as you get close to reception. Then you sort of you cross the bridge, through the tower, and it's beautiful. When you look out to the right and you have this huge cut, which is actually more like 50 feet deep, and you have the Mediterranean blue at the end. It's a very unique place, and I think that's where Antonio's philosophy was very clear. He said, "Listen, if an architect wants to have an ego trip, build a new building. But if you're going to restore or refurbish something existing, you have to respect it. You have to go with it, And it's not about someone being able to point out what you have done to that building. On the contrary, it's give it harmony in its new function, And it's true. You look at Cap Rocat today, and it's very difficult to discern what was there before and what's new, whether these plants were even there. No, actually, no, there was not one green leaf in the building. It was barren, it was abandoned, and everything just fits in very naturally, and always with a sense of place. All of the fabrics are local, from a place well, Bujosa, with all of the linens were brought in from there. The limestone changes color with the light of day. It's a very operistic, as Antonio says. It could be the scene of an Aida or something, because at the end of the day, all of the walls turn gold. We then turn torches on at night, and it's a very magical.
I think that's so funny what Antonio said. And again, for listeners who might not know, aside from being Pablo's partner in work and in life, he's an incredibly talented interior designer and architect. And one of the things I love about the property, and I've been lucky to go to your home, is that it's very different from your home, but they both have sort of a residential grandeur that is also extremely warm. So there's a sense of graciousness and embrace, even though you have these dramatic proportions, and in the case of Cap Rocat, this dramatic setting on the water. It's a really magical place. And would you talk a little bit about some of Antonio's choices in how he makes it feel like a home rather than a hotel?
I think his idea from the beginning is don't give it the register of a hotel. That was a bit our idea when we started out with Cap Rocat. We wanted it to feel as much like a non-hotel as we could, not from the codes of room service, for example. And, everything was, it's funny because ever since a lot of these things have been done elsewhere, so now it seems very commonplace, but we were sort of the first one who, breakfast is, you can choose if you really know what you want to have, you can say it. And if not, it's just surprise me. And what arrives is a big basket, and you just open the basket and things keep coming out of the basket and you never know when it's going to be over. But that was the idea. There's no fixed time for breakfast. The breakfast is anytime you want. You're going to have jet lag, you want breakfast at 4, perfect. So I think that sort of applied to everything, to the decor as well. The challenge was, as you know, the main dining room is a huge space. It's where the soldiers used to sleep. 800 soldiers were sleeping in this place. How do you convert that into a warm, inviting space? Well, with huge curtains made from, I don't know how you call that material, that's what you use for sacks of potatoes, for example. It's that sort of these heavy curtains, but not heavy as in velvet, that we're going to create something very stately or too home or too important. No, they're heavy, but they're huge. And so it was about creating this sort of warmth to these disproportioned size, because the property is huge and we have a very big coastline that belongs to us and 20,000 square meters, underground tunnels. How do you bring all of that together? I think it was a lot of him playing with materials, and I think above all with lighting is key in Cap Rocat. When you have such big spaces, how do you make it warm? How do you make it cozy? How do you make your walk back to your suite at night not seem like, oh my god, am I going to get lost? Am I going to show up in some dungeon? No, it's a very poetic place.
It really is. And you mentioned Bujosa. I've been lucky to go to that ancient Mallorcan and textile factory and studio. There are so many craftsmen on Mallorca, and I would imagine that's one of the ways that property feels so linked to the island and so unique on the island. But can you talk a little bit about some of the things that you use to reflect the real identity of Mallorca in the property?
We've always had the philosophy that people come to Mallorca because of the destination, not because of, maybe Cap Rocat is a different case because it is a bit of a destination hotel in itself, no? But in general, why do people come to Mallorca? Well, if Mallorca weren't beautiful, they wouldn't be coming here. So somehow it's, regardless of the fact that we want to keep that identity, it's also what makes Mallorca successful. So if all of these artisans disappear, well, Melissa might not want to come back to Mallorca. So how are we going to, it's in our selfish interest to actually keep all of these spaces active. So, and the only way to keep them active is to give them business. Okay, yeah, maybe I could buy woven baskets imported from Africa, which would cost a third of the price. But that's not going to help me preserve the Mallorcan traditions and the Mallorcan artisans, etc. And there's a specific weaving technique in Mallorca with a specific sort of a palm leaf. So the woman actually, and it's great because somebody's learned the process from all of the old ladies that are slowly dying off, and no one was inheriting this technique. So she learned the technique, and she's now created sort of an academy. And we pay her to come once a week as a way to contribute to that academy. She comes and weaves there in front of clients to learn to weave with her. And because she creates these baskets and these handbags or these big bags, you can actually personalize your own. So it's about trying to bring all of that into the property. No, with Bujosa, the same thing. I mean, with all of the fabrics will always, yes, we could find cheaper fabrics elsewhere, but I don't want Mallorca to be without these hundreds of year old linen artisans. So, well, if I want them to stay, I'm going to have to give them business. It's a bit like when people complain, oh, it's such a shame bakeries are closing. It's like, yeah, well, where do you buy your bread? Oh, at the supermarket. Well, there you are. That's why they're closing. It's like the same for us. All of the baked goods that you have in the hotel are either baked in the hotel or they come from a bakery in front of the house that we have in Palma that you've been to, because we want to give business to that baker. We don't want to give it to an international manufacturer of croissants who we know is going to do very well, but he's not part of the identity of the island.
Yeah. Oh, and you have such amazing pastries and bakeries in Palma. So of course they need to be continued. No, it's fantastic.
Unfortunately, for my waistline, yeah.
Do you have a favorite part of Cap Rocat?
Not really. I tell Antonio every time we arrive, I'm like, I don't know if I'll ever get tired, because the moment obviously we go to the parking, we don't do the usual check-in route of clients. We go straight to the parking. but you walk down these stairs and suddenly, boom, it's there. And every single time, and I definitely go there quite often, it's like, wow, so it's the whole place for me is amazing. I love the spa, I love the pool, I love the perspectives. I guess what I'm most in love with is his ability to have created these, or to have maintained, or to have enhanced these perspectives, and then adding them palm trees and giving a sense of viewpoints everywhere. But hard to put a favorite on the property. It's very unique.
It's true, though, those sight lines in so many different areas of the hotel are just mind-blowing. They just stop you in your tracks.
You're listening to Passport to Everywhere, and I'm your host, Melissa Biggs Bradley. Joining me today is Pablo Carrington, the innovative hotelier behind Mallorca's Cap Rocat. His company, Marugal, also manages Portugal's Vermelho Hotel, which you may remember is Christian Louboutin's first hotel project. And if you haven't already, be sure to check out my past episode with Christian Louboutin, who designed the stunning property. Now, back to the show.
I know you've won awards for Cap Rocat as a tourism project that really mixed heritage and hospitality, and sustainability, and what we've been talking about, tourism that really preserves the uniqueness of destinations, is something that is important to you. Before we dive into Mallorca, because I want to talk about some favorite things there, how do you think about that across all of your hotels in general, aside from sort of mixing in and supporting the artisans? Are there other ways that you think about sustainability in the properties?
Yes, because for us, sustainability has two aspects. There's the environmental sustainability, which is the obvious one, and then there's the destination sustainability. Back to the idea of contributing to maintaining the destination. So what we do, for example, in Cap Rocat, is we tell clients we're going to add €3 to their bill for every night, which they have the freedom to say they don't want to participate. But for what I thought was very important was, okay, if I'm just going to be the banker that takes Melissa's donation and gives it to something, then what's my added value? So I need to put my money where my mouth is. And what we tell our guests is we're going to match whatever you put. So if you stay 10 days and that's €30, your donation is actually de facto €60. And well, at the end of the day, we manage to have about 50,000 a year, which allows us to participate in an ecological project. So for example, one of the big problems is that tortoises, because the beaches are a lot more used, can no longer hatch their eggs on the beach. And tortoises are very important to eat the jellyfish, among other things. So there's a whole program to help rebuild the population of tortoises on the island. Another part is the cultural part, which is helping, for example, Palacio Vivot, an 18th century palace in Palma, to restore some of the frescoes that they have. And one of the beautiful things that I remember from my childhood landing in Palma was there was a sea of windmills. I mean, it was incredible. It was all these windmills that were around, and there used to be 2,000 windmills on the island, and there are now about 200 still working, and probably 600 in derelict condition. So one of the things we're going to focus on is on rebuilding these windmills. But the problem when you rebuild things is that, you and I can have a passion for, let's say, windmills. But if our children don't, then what we do will only last until we die, and then it'll become derelict again. So one of the key things when you restore and when you work on heritage is to make it self-sustainable. So the advantage is that now there's a system to rebuild these windmills in exactly the same way they were before, but that they produce electricity. So we're actually going to have these windmills that before were for water, for grinding flour, will now be producing electricity, but we will recover something that was part of our landscape. And I want people to start again landing in Mallorca and seeing that sea of windmills, because that's Mallorca, no? So we do that with Cap Rocat, and then we do different, for example, with Urso in Madrid. One of the charms of Madrid is that it still has a lot of mom and pop shops. It still has a lot of the local, seamstress and the local lady who makes handbags. And I was like, okay, so if that's part of the charm of the city, we need to help that charm of the city. So it goes back to what we were saying before about the baker. All of our suppliers are local. So the fishmonger is a fishmonger from the market across the street. Literally, it costs us a bit more money, yes, but you know what? Markets define Madrid. It's such a part of the local neighborhood life. We need to contribute to it. If not, those things will die. No? So it's about that. It's about participating in heritage projects, and at the same time in sustainable, which for us is a key aspect. We have a desalination plant in Cap Rocat. I mean, we're going very far. We're going to be zero emissions quite soon. So there's the ecological part, which is key, but then there's also the heritage part. It's, keep the destination alive. That's why people are coming.
I totally agree. It's so exciting the way you think about it too. And I know that you've inspired other people in the industry, which is great because you've really shown that you can do something that is both preserving heritage and is sustainable and culturally positive. In fact, I think it's probably one of the reasons that you are as sought after as a hotel property. So it's good business as well as doing good. And I think you've inspired a lot of other people to follow the lead. So Mallorca, which I love, and I was lucky to be with you this spring in twice. From your perspective, what is it that makes the island so special?
It's very interesting because not many people know that the city of Palma, which is the capital of Mallorca, was 8 times bigger than Barcelona in the 19th century. Because Barcelona is a city and a region that wasn't particularly rich until the boom of Barcelona is really in the 19th century. But Mallorca has been a very strong trade center for centuries. And a proof of it is, and it's something we actually want to work on, because just the city of Palma, the buildings are still there, except 99% of them have been reconverted into something else. But just the city of Palma has over 170 palaces. And when we're saying palaces, we're talking houses that have 20,000 square feet, 40,000 square feet, not a 1,000 square feet house that you suddenly call a palace. No, real big stately homes. Why? Because it was a very wealthy center. It was a center of commerce with the Mediterranean. There's a great poet who came to Mallorca, Robert Graves, and before coming, he asked Gertrude Stein in Paris. He said, "Oh, I hear you've been to Mallorca and I'm going. Do you recommend it?" And Gertrude Stein said, "Well, it's paradise if you can stand it." And probably, in the early 20th century, it was paradise. And today, in my opinion, it still is paradise. It has an amazing countryside, very serene countryside. You and I had dinner one evening in a country house of friends of ours, beautiful, totally different to where you were staying in Dea, totally different to where Cap Rocat is. I mean, the difference in scenery on the island is incredible. And you have the north coast, which you feel like you could be in Amalfi. You have the southern coast, which is, beautiful long beach. I don't know. It's got a very strong identity. Themselves, the people have a very strong identity.
It does. And actually, you're totally right. The diversity for an island of its size is extraordinary. The first time I went years ago, I stayed basically only in Dea. And over the years, I've discovered areas that are so different. For someone who's going to Mallorca for the first time, and I do think it's one of those places that you think you're going to Mallorca once because you want to check it off your list. Almost nobody goes to Mallorca once. It's the kind of place that you go back to again and again because it is so beautiful and special. But for those people who are going for the first time, what do you recommend? How do they think about experiencing the island?
I would probably say 2 things, because one reality is that it's a big tourist destination. So it's very easily to get trapped up. I wouldn't say in the wrong place, because if you're a savvy traveler, you will know where to go, but you could get trapped up with people, with too many people. So I would definitely say 2 things. First of all, rent a car or get a driver, for sure. It's an island worth discovering, as you said yourself. And secondly, ignore Instagram, listen to the concierge or listen to your travel advisor, because if a lot of people make the mistake, I guess maybe less savvy travelers of thinking they are savvy, of looking at Instagram and, oh, we should go here. Yeah, well, the problem is you and another 200,000 people had the same idea this morning. And whereas a travel specialist from your company or our concierge are going to tell them, no, take the car, drive through these little country roads with the beautiful stone walls. You're going to reach this village, and you're going to end up seeing a beautiful Mallorca. You can sort of hop into the very touristy sites if you want to, because the cathedral is fantastic and it's beautiful. But it's definitely, definitely move around and definitely let yourself be advised by people who know the island.
Totally agree. And also, one of the things, again, staying at Cap Rocat, you almost feel like you're on a boat, but I always say to people, you've got to get on the water.
Totally. Yeah, that's another thing of the Balearics in general. We have a very special sea here. I mean, and the turquoise water is quite extraordinary. That's always what I say. It's like if you're in Cap Rocat, the first thing you should do in the morning is, take a boat or take a paddle board or take a kayak and just go around the cape and swim. The sea is flat because the thermal winds start at noon. So the mornings are beautiful. I mean, and enjoy that sea because it's incredible.
Is there a time of year that you recommend visiting? I mean, we've started to see more and more people going a little bit off season. What are your favorite times?
My favorite time is February. It's a very sweet month because you have the almonds in blossom, and the island is just very Mallorcan. It's very local, and everything is open. It's not like maybe other regions in Southern Europe that close down in the winter totally, and you're like, oh my God, it's a shame. We went and half the restaurants were closed. No, you can go to Sineu, you can go to different villages, and they're very lively, and it's again because it has a very strong culture, and it's a very busy island and by the locals, not by tourists. No, so February has a sweet spot for me, but I also think April, May, June, and September, October. Now, given climate change, October is probably the new, I don't know if the new September or the new August, depending on what you like. No, but the sea is still warm. There are less people. The light is still beautiful. So I think it's I would definitely say either spring or autumn. Late fall and February for me.
Spain is really interesting. You've got projects there. It seems to be, in some ways, growing even faster than its tourist neighbors in terms of travel experiences. Of France and Italy. Spain and Portugal has had so much development in recent years. It's really interesting. Can you talk a little bit about places that you're looking at or that you think are up and coming?
Spain we're lucky enough that we have a very varied country, but varied in terms of climate, in terms of customs, in terms of cuisine, in terms of everything. So, if you visit Andalusia, you cannot think you've seen Spain because it's about as opposite and different from the Basque country as it would be from Denmark, literally, except that we speak the same language. It's the only thing we have in common. But so for me, there are a couple of regions that I think have a lot of potential. One of them is La Rioja, which is south of Bilbao, which is the wine region. I mean, it's where the Spanish language was first written and spoken, has huge heritage sites, amazing wine, obviously, all of the wine region. So La Rioja, for me, it's something that I don't understand how it hasn't developed more and sooner, because it's got the gastronomy and the wine, incredible heritage, and a beautiful rolling hills and the vines and everything. So for me, it's an area that's in my opinion, highly recommendable, and where I would definitely like to have a property soon. And another area which I like a lot is, and it's not that far from Madrid too, it's 2 hours west of Madrid, is the whole Salamanca area. Salamanca, Avila. Avila is a walled city. It's 100% walled. It's spectacular. And it's still not really on that bucket list of a lot of people. I understand. And as you say, probably what you said of Mallorca applies in a certain way to Spain in general. No, that you think you might just go once to Spain and do Madrid, Barcelona, Sevilla, and there I tick the box, and you realize that there's a lot more and very different. No, so for me, that area of Salamanca, Avila, Zamora, just the heritage that's there, it's still very authentic. It's still, and I guess we didn't have somebody writing A Winter in Tuscany or whatever that book was, and making it popular. No one went to Salamanca and wrote that. Otherwise, we would probably have Salamanca full of luxury hotels. But those two areas, I'm definitely keeping an eye on them, and I think they're worth visiting.
And are there any new projects that you can talk about? I know you're always working on new things.
Well, we just opened one in Formentera. We just opened a new one, Dunas de Formentera, which I have to say, Formentera, which is a small island of Ibiza, for me, it's a place where the moment you get off the ferry, because you have to fly to Ibiza and then you take a 20-minute ferry, which is nothing. But the moment you get off, it's like your whole pressure comes down. I mean, and I go for work, and even so, I'm relaxing. And it's an island that has managed to keep its essence. I mean, it's got neighboring Ibiza, which is party town and bustling, and this island is still about. It's barefoot. It's about there are no traffic lights. It's about flip-flops or barefoot. I mean, it's actually still the entire island is nudist. So not that you have to, but it just shows that the island hasn't lost what defined its soul. It's like, so you're in front of our hotel, in front of Gecko, suddenly you will have somebody there just swimming naked, and you're like, because he doesn't care, because that's what defined Formentera. And there's just something very great that the island hasn't globalized, So after having Gecko, which we loved, we took over Dunas, it's 11 little buildings in the dunes, rolling down to the sea. You're literally not even 100 feet from the sea, and just little houses. Again, very organic, very, very low key. Somebody said, "Do you see the sea from all of the rooms?" I was like, "No, you see it from most of them, but you hear it from all of them." And for me, practically hearing the sea is more important. No, the idea of sleeping at night, just hearing the waves. I mean, best sound you can have. No, so yeah, we're very excited with that project. It opened a month ago, so You'll have to come and visit sometime.
I have had such happy memories of going to Formentera by boat from Ibiza, and we, you get off the boat with your caftan in a plastic bag and swim to shore. It's totally bare feet, and you eat with, sand in your hair and amazing fish.
Exactly. No, I mean, obviously there are new restaurants and new things that are happening, but they're managing to put the break, which I find is so important, that the place keeps its essence, which I think is also one of the later you come on the scene of developing yourself as a tourist destination, the more you can learn from the mistakes of the others. No, and I think that's where Portugal has been extremely intelligent, the way they allow for new licenses in Lisbon. It's not free for all. They've seen what happened to Barcelona, they've seen what happened to Venice. So they're taking it calmly. And I think places like Formentera, like Portugal, that have learned from the mistakes of other overdeveloped destinations, which can be beautiful but are overdeveloped, is very interesting.
Pablo, where do you want to go next for vacation, not for work?
I want to go to an Austrian lake. I've decided I want fresh air, crisp water, and doing some research now on a hotel where I can just go and do hikes and swim in the lake. I had to go to my kid's graduation last week in Lausanne in Switzerland, and we're staying at the Beau Rivage Palace, which is a beautiful hotel overlooking the lake. And I didn't have time, but I could see all these people swimming in the lake and that sort of crisp water, which I love of lakes. And I was like, okay, this is what I need to do this summer at some point, off to the mountains somewhere, and then a bit of boating. That's a family trip, and this year it'll be probably just around the Balearic Islands.
It's so great to see you, Pablo. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much to Pablo for joining me today and giving us an inside look at Cap Rocat. I hope our conversation inspires you to visit Mallorca and experience the history and beauty for yourself. You can learn more about the hotel by visiting www.caprocat, that's CAPROCAT.com, or by following Cap Rocat on Instagram at @cap_rocat. Coming up on Passport to Everywhere, we'll be exploring more of the world's most legendary hotels, from Gorokadan in Japan to Villa Lacoste in France. In the meantime, head to Indagare.com and check out our latest destination guides. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for joining us at Passport to Everywhere. We hope you'll join the journey and subscribe. For more travel inspiration, visit Indagare.com, INDAGARE. This has been Passport to Everywhere.